Hello and welcome to the sixth episode of Stories of Awakening. We're here today with a very special guest, Allannah Capwell, who I have met through the Lee Harris tribe. And I'm very excited to have this conversation. She and I have met at a few different occasions, but never had an opportunity really to share our stories fully with each other. So we've only just touched the tip of the iceberg together with the work that she does and the history that she brings and the special talents that she offers. The term that we're going to use to introduce Allannah is an intuitive embodied consciousness guide. And there's many sort of titles and tools underneath that we'll discuss. But first, I want to introduce you to Allannah and ask her to begin with just sharing a little bit of your history of where you're from. We've started that conversation in our pre-conversation, and I would love to officially get some of that down on the recording for our communities, because I think it's really interesting and really pertinent to where our conversation might be headed today. Welcome, Allannah.
Well, welcome. I'm really excited to have this conversation too, because you've been someone out there that I felt really connected with and really admiring the work that you're doing. So I'm really glad to be here. So your question about where I'm from, I'm going to just start with the fact that I grew up in Oregon and we're going on 8 generations in Oregon. So we go way back in the history of the country and the Oregon Territory, you might say, before it was a state. And so there's this very profound, strong connection to the land. And it's really great. I have the opportunity to be here now. Because I've been traveling. So yeah, I want to sort of leave it there because this profound connection with the land, and as a child growing up with that, the land and nature was everything. And so I grew up with this great sensitivity to nature. And you know, while I was sitting here earlier, it just came through to me that one of the things that was very profound in that was not only having the feeling and the sensitivity to nature, but actually learning to see nature, which a lot of us don't anymore. We so many have lost that connection, and so they're seeing the idea of nature and not really seeing this really incredible, you know, detail and beauty and what it can show us about being alive and ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that was a beautiful image that came through of, you know, yeah. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. I would love to hear about, I want to flesh out the image for myself of the way that you spent time with nature when you were a kid, and like what parts of nature that you felt most connected to starting out.
Well, I grew up as a very young child, I grew up on a farm, and we've always been in nature on farms or in the forest and that. And so I just spent days. My parents would literally just open the door and say, go. And so it was not unusual for us to be gone all day. I can remember just sort of taking a nap, you know, on the side of a hill in the dirt and feeling the sun. It was very natural, and waking up and, you know, perhaps one of the most profound memories is waking up and having a deer literally looking down at me, standing over me. And I remember that was the first time I had this very, very not only profound connection to nature, but also to, you know, the cosmos, having seen through the eyes of this deer and understanding that there was a very, very large reality out there that we participate in. And it was very profound. I think that was one of the first moments when I felt this real profound connection between the cosmos and nature itself, that they were in constant communication. I want to say we forget that the earth has its own relationship with the other dimensions and the cosmos. We don't on a daily basis see nature that way. We see ourselves in relation to it, but we don't step back far enough to see it in relation with the universe.
Mm-hmm.
So having that early experience of that, it's always been there. It's always been there inside. And so I've always had this sense of when I travel, and I've traveled a lot, one of my primary things is to go out and want to see, get out of a city, and just really want to see, connect with the nature, to see what it feels like.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And to feel that vibration, to feel that energy, and because it's very different, and to feel it changing also.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that experience of connecting with nature in places, like being able to feel the actual soul or the spirit of the earth, the spirits of the earth, in a place that doesn't have the overlay of the human dream on top of it. I noticed that was one of my big experiences coming back from Costa Rica. I did the Soul Magic retreat with Lee this year, and that particular piece of land is so vitally alive, and the energy of nature is so strong and a force to be reckoned with. I would say very strong and souled. And then coming back and flying over the city of Chicago and looking down and being like, like just that feeling of like, that's not the earth. You know, it doesn't feel, you don't feel the earth rising up through the ground here. You have to search a little bit harder to find. And I think that that's a very interesting image, that looking into the eyes of a wild creature and seeing that energy reflected back is actually experiencing the universe beyond the understanding that we as humans have of the earth, for most of us, right?
Right. And it's really interesting that you mentioned Soul Magic Costa Rica, because I was in Costa Rica the year before with Lee Harris in the Soul Magic retreat. And I'm just going to put it out there. If you haven't done it and you want to, it's beautiful. The experience, but also experiencing the land is quite profound.
Mm-hmm.
And nature there is very profound. And I would say that not only did I connect with nature there, but my experience there in beginning to feel these vibrations was also the first time there that I experienced really visually seeing a lot of our ancient ages, the tribal energies. And when I say tribal energies, what I'm saying is their relationship to the earth and the kind of vibrational energy and intuitive understanding. They knew how to, I would say, articulate that, sing, and so they had a very energetic and profound relationship to it that allowed them to tap into that and really do amazing healing work for their communities and that. And we've lost touch with that, but I think more and more people are coming back into touch with that and feeling it. So being able to actually experience that energy in a very particular place has been an amazing experience for me. I remember having a conversation with someone we both know, who's also a healer and intuitive, Brenda Carolyn, and she goes to Egypt a lot, but about Petra. I was in Petra and had amazing experiences there with the Bedouin, and just connecting into that land opened so much up inside of me that, but just tapping into things that I already knew, but hadn't opened myself to that knowing yet. And I think that we can do that. Nature can facilitate that a great deal. I really do. And so one of the things that I've been doing in the present, and it's been fairly new, is I do channel. And one of the things that has been coming through lately are these sort of vibrational song lines that are connected to the land. And I have to be honest and say, if someone would have said, 5 years ago that I would be doing this, I would have laughed, right? But the experiences I've had in relation to the earth and the land and the places I've traveled to has really put me in touch with that. And so it's been coming through, and it's been amazing, So nature is very, we all know it,
Mm-hmm.
but can we feel it? Can we get in conversation with it? What does that energy feel like? Can we flow with it and let it speak through us is an amazing thing. And yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think that in some ways, that's what separates us from the wild knowing of the human form. What would connect us to nature would be being able to bring things all the way through our systems, right? So I love, the term embodied pops up from your chosen title. And I think it's such an important word for this time, because the images that I'm getting as you're talking, there's a lot of images that I'm getting while you're talking. And that's part of the way that my counsel talks to me, is in images. So I've got a lot of great images, but one of the things that I'm seeing is this field in which most of humanity exists and has been taught to exist, right? Trained to exist, which is this very mentally truncated zone, right? And that there's this feeling of, what would it take for us to be able to reach into the cosmos and to feel our connection with the cosmos and with the ancient history of the cosmos? And what would it feel like to connect with the earth and connect with the truth of the earth and the ancient history that's inside the earth, our history that's inside the earth, right? And both of these are deficits in the modern human experience. And so, one of the words that keeps getting projected in my mind is this idea of slow down, is that we need to slow down, right? It requires that of us, even if we have the tools. Like when you were in Petra, you had to sit and you had to slow down and you had to really listen and feel, right? Because I think a lot of us are trained, and we're trained this way through our schooling, to accumulate information and knowledge, but it's not wisdom because we don't experience it in our bodies.
That's exactly right. And one of the things that we're doing, because it's brought to us through language, is that we think of it first as an idea. We actually are looking out into nature and seeing the idea of nature because we're naming it. So one of the things that I used to do with, I used to be a professor, and one of the things that I used to do with students, but I think it's very, very profound, is just to have them go out and take off their shoes and really sit down and say, first of all, just observe. Don't do anything, but just observe, and do that. It was called the Ode to Nature. So just observe and feel, and then describe what you see, what you feel, right? Getting out of the idea that I should know something, or it's this or that, and saying, can't use, if it's, pretend you don't know it's a leaf. What would, how would you describe it? What would it feel like? And I think that we need to do a lot more of that, all of us, because when we get out and actually touch nature, and we let go of the idea of what we think it is, it starts coming, that energy, the vibration of it starts coming into our bodies in ways that we're not used to. And what wants to come out of our mouths may not be words, but may be different sounds in that, because the vibration of nature, is not a is not something that wants to be necessarily channeled through language. Language is a mental structure, right? So allowing ourselves, which is very difficult for most of us, to allow ourselves to make sound and movement that's not language based is really hard. You know, for those of us in the healing world and that, we get it. You know, we're comfortable with just making sounds. But even those of us who are coming into this, just allowing our bodies to make sound in relation to something is very uncomfortable, but actually that's allowing that energy through, and it's amazing what kind of healing in the body occurs, what comes up, what memories, and not just from our current timeline, but just our knowing that comes up is really pretty amazing. And that's been my experience in a huge and profound way in the last, I would say, the last 8 years. And what it's brought to me has just been amazing.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
I think that can be translated in so many different ways, that piece of advice of letting whatever's trying to come to us come through us.
Yes.
You know, and that vibration, we're ultimately receiving vibration, right? And vibration can be translated into all these different forms, all these different senses. But that our use of language is really, what I experience is like kind of the last frontier of translation. So when I'm receiving information, it's like in my body and its movement and its sound and its emotion, and that gets translated into a story, into meaning. And the very last level of my own process is writing it down as a poem, because that allows me to sort of bring it all the way through all these different levels of process. But I could never jump to that as my first mode of understanding. And so I think that sometimes we have a challenge even within the transformational community of understanding our own powers, right, of intuition, because we have such a flat or two-dimensional understanding of how channels or how intuitives receive information. So I've had a lot of people within the transformational community that are clearly super intuitive, but they don't claim or understand or use their own intuitive wisdom in a way that feels empowering, because they don't understand how that information is coming in.
That's absolutely true, you know, and this is the other thing I think is really important for us in the transformational world is, you know, we talk about the energy shifts that are occurring, and we all know we're going through, and the transformation of the earth, and that there are so many people experiencing it. We're all experiencing it. We may not have the language of it, but we're all feeling it. So, you know, if we can't talk about it, doesn't mean we're not experiencing it. And you know, I sometimes hear conversations in the transformational world that, you know, I haven't found my tribe, or they don't feel this, or, you know, and I had that feeling too. But sometimes when you just stop and are just in nature or just feeling mode and being, you know, being leads to doing. And it used to be, we have this paradigm that doing leads to being, and we're switching that. But being with people in nature and connecting them with those sounds, and that opens up those channels, I believe, those channels of knowing. And my experience of this has, with clients, with people that I've worked with, is that it's also brought healing as well. And that's a kind of empowerment, and it's a kind of empowerment that is being, and it's unfamiliar, and it can be scary because it feels large vibrationally. And we're, you know, we go, what do I do with all this energy? And I do believe there are many people in the transformational world who, you know, letting it flow through us is tough, you know, it's tough. You know, rather than thinking we need to automatically do something with it, we need to put it in a structure. That will come, whether it's language, whether it's working on somebody, or, you know, But if we want to feel the immense size of it, just being is really wonderful, and connecting to that. Yeah. All right, that's not very articulate there, but
no, it's great. I think a lot of things come up for me around that. I'm getting the message to link it back to nature.
Yeah.
Well, and I think one of the things that comes up for me though is that we don't understand the enormity of what we're sitting inside of. We only see a small sort of a small spectrum, a hopefully ever expanding spectrum of what we're experiencing, but we see this small spectrum. And I think, you know, when we have this whole array of emotions, as common as they may be within the transformational community, we might take it very personally, right? We might take it very personally that I don't know my worth. I don't feel like I belong. I feel like I don't understand my own power. I feel like I'm not being perceived correctly. I don't know how to use what comes through me and use it in my work or use it in the world. And these are very like planetary experiences right now, I feel like. And so I think
certainly went through this. I mean, I'm sitting there going, yep, that's me. That's exactly me. I grew up with this great sensitivity, and I had no idea. And I think there are a lot of children now, and there have been, and there are a lot of empaths out there who have grown up with this incredible sensitivity, didn't and don't know it. I didn't know that I was seeing things, feeling things, experiencing things that others didn't see. I truly thought it was obvious to everyone. And so I grew up for all the way into my young adulthood and further, where I learned and took on all of these filters, from family, from education, from the culture at large, that there is this kind of, we have all these filters in place that that keep us from allowing ourselves to actually express, that energetic knowing, and allows us to say, this is what I'm seeing, this is what I'm experiencing. So there isn't this big demarcation between this really beautiful, expansive internal nature and the world we live in, right? It's connected. It's one. It's not separate. And so unlearning those filters is, and we have to go through them. They come up as memories, they come up as emotions. Emotions are big ones. I just read something that Michaela Sheldon, who is a channel, and a beautiful channel who channels many, many beings and ascended masters and more. And, she was saying that our idea of, in the transformational world, when we're doing spiritual work, there are a lot of people who say, okay, it's about getting to a place of always kind of being better or feeling good. And it's really not about that. We need all those emotions. We don't stop feeling. We actually end up feeling more. We feel more, we experience more energetic vibrations, but we're not getting caught in it. And we have a very different relationship to it, so that we can allow it to flow through us, and we can be in it, and we can experience its gifts, rather than saying, oh, I must not be good enough, or I must not be spiritual enough because I'm feeling down, or I'm I'm feeling anger, or I'm feeling frustration, or gosh, today feels like a real flatliner, The gift is, where's this coming from? And, our relationship changes. I think one of the things that's what nature has really taught me is you know, the more you allow yourself to see and feel those things, the more you can see that you have a relationship to it, that you can actually use it as a gift. You are not the emotion, you are not the experience, you are not the thought. You know, you get to look at it,
Mm-hmm.
the witness, the observer. And so all the emotions
Mm-hmm.
are beautiful, right? Because your relationship to them changes. And I think nature can really help us experience that more. Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you
I
know,
think nature is a great teacher. I think one of the most profound teachings that I've received is this idea that the emotions are their own beings, their own entities that travel through us like the wind. And if we can be more like nature, the bravery, the courage, the flexibility of a forest that allows the wind to travel through it and allows it to sing and dance through the branches and possibly break branches and knock over trees, but be open, be open to the wind and allow it to teach us and travel through, as opposed to being hard and angular and bracing ourselves like a cityscape would against the wind, which creates all sorts of little eddies and microclimates and really violent sort of like distortions of that original wind. Then we can really learn from it. But I think that we're taught to so over-identify with everything, like you're saying, like everything we feel, everything we think, everything we experience. And instead, if we could just validate that those are happening and that is true, we're truthfully hearing those thoughts or feeling those emotions or having those experience, whether or not the thought or the emotion or the experience is true outside of the fact that it's occurring, and then we can de-identify from it. We start to get closer to figuring out who we actually are and what we actually believe and think, which is layers upon layers deeper than most of us experience ourselves.
it is. And I think one of the most profound things that we can do is to begin to develop literally a relationship with our emotions, be able to talk to them. I love that idea that they are their own entities, and I think that that's a really profound, a way to view it. And I would add to that, having a conversation with them.
Mm-hmm.
As a young person, because I perceived so much and didn't know how to, I really got, I got closed off in there very, very deeply. So it really was just this profound opening, layer after layer after layer. And after a while, I was like, oh, well, that's just shame, or oh, that's just guilt, or oh, interesting, everybody has guilt. You literally have a different relationship to them, and you become much more tender, compassionate, and you start holding space not only for others but for yourself. And I think I see this a lot. People that I know who are beautiful healers, channelers, and we all need to be reminded to hold that space for ourselves too. And one of the places that we can do that best is to go outside and sit on the ground. Even a park in the city. I was laughing because you were mentioning the city, and I actually lived in Alaska in the woods. For some time, I went there to literally learn how to live in this body. So I did a lot of chop wood, carry water. But I actually moved from Alaska to New York City. And someone said, what was that like? Wasn't it crazy making it? And it was very strange. I remember walking down these long avenues, Manhattan, and going, this is just like living in the mountains. Here's this fierce wind coming through, these tall buildings. They were like, okay, yeah, these are like mountains. And that the only thing I didn't see were, a lot of the trees. And then I thought, well, what are the trees? And I thought, there's a lot of people here,
Mm.
a lot of people here, you know.
Mm.
So translating, bringing our experiences, learning how to bridge. We love that word.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bridge that perception instead of drawing a hard line, you know,
Mm.
asking ourselves, how can I let this flow through both in physical being as well as in some sort of visual feeling, understanding? How can I allow it to flow through instead of going, it's either this or that?
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that's a beautiful vision for the future, you know, that if we are to live in these very human-based realities, these human-based communities, that there's a way in which nature can be brought up through the ground into the human dream, and that the human dream can be, you know, like we were saying before, like that inner and outer reality are not separate, they're reflections of each other, right? So above, so below, so in, so out. And so, you know, I think some of our most beautiful visions of the future are these cities that have been greened, these cities that have allowed nature to come back in this really biodiverse way. And instead of the suppression of nature, right, which is this common modern civilized, and very much in quotes, civilized human ideas that we're here to control and suppress nature, as opposed to we're here to dance with nature and find our place within it and to honor it. And so I even see that, you know, in my neighborhood, and being with the squirrels and the chipmunks. We have a chipmunk that lives inside of our front stairs, and we feed him walnuts every few days. And we just have this really amazing relationship. And I think building those connections again. One of the images that was coming to mind, both for your experience and I think for the larger meta experience or the planetary experience, is, you know, a lot of this is about connections. So one of the things I'm really interested in is your nearly soon to be 8 generations on the same part of the earth, on the same land, and that feeling of rooting and connection into the land that is so rare in the American human experience, I would say. One of the messages I've got years and years ago from this beautiful eagle-headed rock that I found in North Carolina, the rock said to me, "You all need to learn to be native to the land." That is the deepest illness that humans have in this country, is that so many of us came from other places and then have subsequently moved around many, many times, and that we're not fully landed in our bodies on this land. We don't see this land as part of us. We don't see ourselves coming from this earth, right? When in fact, we've all come from this earth in a bigger sense, right? These bodies are borrowed from this soil, from this earth. The earth has constructed us, so we are of this land. But to have a specific connection with a piece of land, with a place on this planet, to feel that connection is something that so many of us grew up without, and are now, as people awakening, needing to create those connections, needing to learn how to create those connections. And I think also the other side of that is that most of us aren't coming through families that understand transformational, sensitive, empathic, transformational children, right? And so our generation of healers are having to unlearn all of the constraints that were put on the outside of us so that the inside of us could speak. And I'm seeing now this other side of that, which is that my children don't have to have that put on them. Yes. So my children are incredibly intuitive and sensitive and just amazing. And I get to hold that space for them and be like, I am not going to tell you that anything you're experiencing is wrong or not okay. I'm going to teach you how to walk with that in the world. But I affirm all of those experiences as true.
I think one of the amazing things is right now is, and I see this over and over, we'd all do well to learn from these beautiful young people. We really would, because people are coming in right now, children are coming in with these amazing abilities. Because of the transition that we all know that the earth is going through and that we're all going through consciously. I mean, we are in a period of conscious evolution, and we have all these young beings, these young people coming and holding this awareness, you know, and we know this. We know that children come in and we give them a piece of technology and they seem to know how to use it in seconds. It's because they're coming in with this kind of knowing. And so being open to that and not shutting it down is, and learning from it, I mean, is amazing. But a lot of us, you're absolutely right, are having to unlearn those filters that we've, you know, been overlaid with, right? And I want to go back to that in relation to the earth and that, because you were talking about a very particular piece of land. One of my amazing experiences I've had lately in the last few years is that this connection with the land has brought me into contact with a lot of tribal sort of histories, intuitively. And I want to say, you know, I'm being sort of asked to say at this moment is that they are all over the place, right? Their connection, they're saying, I'm hearing is yes, there are particular places, but right now there seem to be a lot of united, energetic, tribal energies going on, and they're moving around the globe, all over, you know, this in a way they're saying nomadic. We've always been nomadic. We are nomadic on the earth. And so they're saying this, while if you can do that in a particular place, that's a beautiful thing, but also need to open it up to that it is a global Gaia. The earth is alive. And so we can make that connection through a particular and understand that that's global. That's really important. I think we all do understand that. But this energy of, I just lost my train of thought there because something was just, yeah, you know, that's the thing. And I think what I want to go back to and say is that there are a lot of people, I think, who are able to go out and be with the land. I want to bring this back to this too. I've heard people talk about this and saying, well, I want to, you know, I want to heal the earth and that. And my feeling is that I don't think we heal the earth. I think we become energetically aligned. And that's what I'm hearing in the back. And they're saying, yes, we become energetically aligned with the frequencies of a particular place. They say, yes. We become aligned with the frequencies of the earth and things shift there. We all know about Sedona, the powerful energy that goes on there. And there are many other places that are coming online. Mm-hmm. One of the amazing things, I've been on the road. I did not want to, last July, it came through to me and it said, oh, you're going west. And I was like, no, I'm not. You know, I was like, I don't want to go west. And sure enough, by December, all of a sudden, things shifted. And I said, okay, I'll go. And once I said, okay, within 2 weeks, I packed up my house and I was on the road. And one of the things that trip has really been about is I've been traveling internationally for years, the last 8 to 10 years, and not in the US so much. And one of the amazing things is that I've just been saying, okay, guide me. And I've just been guided to these most amazing places and had conversations with people and being with them and staying with them and them re-experiencing the energetic connection that they have with the land that they had somehow gotten separated from, right? Mm-hmm. I've been going, you know, one of the first places was in Virginia, and I was with a group of people, and I was just suddenly put in touch with this being a very soft spot. And I was like, what do you mean by soft spot? And it was just coming through. And we were having a conversation on a picnic, and then everybody was suddenly just sitting there and going, oh, I get it. I feel it, you know. So reconnecting with that, I feel like being guided, we can do that. That can happen all over. And as people travel, some people, they're going to find out if they need to go to Sedona to experience it there. Great. But hopefully we can take that back and touch down on the earth in the community they are in. You know, so we have, because what I'm hearing is that these soft spots, energetic grids, they're popping all over the place right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They're popping all over the place.
Yeah, and I think that sort of, I'm hearing the sort of the same message. It's awesome that you articulated it so well, but this idea that wherever it is that we can find to really get into that soft spot of Gaia and connect deeply, then it is important for us to take that knowledge, that wisdom, that direct experience back to our communities and seed that where we are, right? So that we can do that all over the world, because one of the healing picture, as we become in alignment with the earth and we take ourselves out of this, I am the healer of the earth, right? But we become healing with the earth, right? Ourselves healing. One of the ways that we need to heal in the same way that the earth needs to heal is we need to heal from dismemberment. You know, and in feminist theory class, we talk about the dismemberment of the female form, right? In advertisement. You can look at advertisements and you can see this very masculine vision of the female as just boobs, or like just this one part of the body, right? And often without a head, and without that, the what we consider the identifier of consciousness is in the facial expressions, right? So this sort of dismemberment. And I've received very similar messages about Gaia and about this earth, is the way that humans have seen her and cut her into pieces, right? And these pieces go along the country lines and the state lines and these borders that we've created in which we've chopped her into pieces. But it isn't about one piece being different than the whole. It is about us seeing the whole and being able to acknowledge and experience the holism of Gaia. But that's also within ourselves, being able to experience ourselves as a whole being, right? And not just see ourselves as a collection of segregated parts.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the things too, and this is one of the things that I found really attractive about your work, is once you experience this, you know, say you've gone to Sedona, or say you've gone somewhere and you've experienced, oh yeah, I really felt the high vibration. And that is, how are you going to carry that and acknowledge it externally? How can you take it back? And I think that one of the ways that, and this is what I love about what you're doing, is creating a ritual to be able to speak it, to externalize that connection. Because when we don't allow ourselves to externalize it, bring it through, we end up saying, well, that was an internal experience. And we don't fully embody it. And I think that's one of the things that I really, really, really had to go through in my own journey of coming to this, was allowing it to externalize. And you know, I can remember, since we both know Lee Harris, I'm just going to say this. I can remember I was mentoring with him, and you know, he just looked at me and he said, "No, you're seeing it, and they're not. Just go ahead and bring it through." You know. And as a growing up, I was told never, because I was seeing things, and people, you know, my siblings was like, "Oh my God, she's going to say something." You know, so I was always told, "Be quiet. Whatever you see, don't say anything," because I made people uncomfortable, right? All of a sudden it was like the bomb that was dropped in the picnic. And so I learned not to externalize, literally not to speak. And for a while had a speech impediment. I literally had to relearn to speak as a child. So I think that we do that. We have these experiences, even as adults, even as transformational healers, or just any of us in this journey, not going on. We're all on it, but allowing ourselves to externalize it in some way and recognize it and express gratitude. And it's one of the things that I love about what you're doing is creating ritual. Ritual has been lost, and that's, so much ritual has been lost because of our disconnection to formal religion, because it sort of flatlined, if you would. It lost its embodiment. We lost that embodied relationship to it. So really allowing ourselves to externalize is, I think, one of the hugest shifts that I went through. The lessons, the learning, the seeing was huge. Allowing that, to allow it to open up. And then you don't feel like there's this deep internal experience that doesn't match the external world.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of the undercurrent of discomfort that so many people feel in their lives, is that incongruity between what they experience and what they express and who they are, what they experience of themselves internally and how they express externally, and the reflection coming back from their external reflection, external expression. Very similar to what we were talking about before about the process itself of embodying wisdom, right? Is letting it come all the way through.
Yep, I just, another wonderful channeler is Sarah Landon, and she was just talking on the John Berkoff show the other day about this very thing. We know now, but it's not landed. It's not embodied fully. We have, we're at a place now where we really have to embody it. So what does that embodiment mean? And that's the key thing that I'm really interested in is, and that's why I use the term embodied consciousness guide, because first of all, it's allowing us to feel our energetic body and to understand that we don't want to be in our energetic body just when we're in meditation or when we're, around, to understand that it's something that breathes and expands, but that if we can remain really aware of that, then our externalization of who we are becomes very natural and a lot easier. It's not as difficult, not as trying, right? And this embodiment, we talk about the shift, the paradigm shift from, doing to being, but it's that embodiment of that, staying in that energetic awareness. Instead of going, well, that I only do that when I'm with certain friends, or I only do it when I'm safe, or I only do it when I'm meditating, or, no, it's about landing it in the body and externalizing it. And if we can do that consciously, and we need to do it consciously, both through, often it's first through rituals and then it becomes ritualized in us.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I love that discussion of rituals being so important and something that we've really lost, because what we're talking about is containership, right? Like how to create a container that feels safe so that we can express. And that's one of my favorite things about holding small circles, is just even in the instruction at the very beginning of why we share, how we share, and more importantly, how we listen to each other and how we hold space together and affirm that space. People will often be crying before we finish the introduction of just that sort of like, let's all come to an agreement about how we're going to hold this space together, because it's that important to people. And it's something that we so deeply lack in our lives and in our culture. Right. So we start with that small container of a ceremony or a class, or a session. But then really, you're right. We need to be able to learn to expand that into the art of being in our lives. Our lives become the larger container. the ritual of our day and how we interact with our day is the larger container to contain that. And then it becomes less about, well, I didn't meditate today, so I didn't do the practice, right? It's not about that. We have so much worth attached to doing, right? That we become obsessed with these narrow perceptions of what it means to be in the embodied state. But really, we're trying to figure out ways to be in the embodied state all the time.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I found really beautiful from Lee Harris when he channels disease. They've often said, your being leads to doing. And, I remember hearing that the very first time, and I was like, okay, right? Response, okay,
Yeah.
But as I've, been reconnecting with nature and working with people, it's become, it's that knowing of that being leads to doing. And, when I'm working with people, a client or something, and asking, they'll just say, well, now that I'm, it takes me a while to come back. And I said, come back from where? Why can't you just be there? Why do you need to come back? Where are you coming back to? Right? It's as if though, and and I've spent a lot of time meditating. I thought I was going to be a monk at one time, and so I love meditating. I'm right there. But there's a beautiful thing in monasteries that we just need to be able to allow to be in the world, is that there's the meditation of doing. Meditation doesn't happen just when you're on your zafu, on your cushion. Meditation is being. It's really being who you are. And that infuses all of your doing, right? So when people say, oh, I've got to come back, or I'm just like, where are you coming back from?
Mm-hmm.
Where are you going? It's okay to just, we need to allow ourselves to know that it's just okay. We need a new definition also of vulnerability, what it means to be vulnerable. It's a kind of strength, it's allowing ourselves to be that open, that connected, and knowing when we're in that beautiful open space, that things don't affect us in a personal way anymore. We become the observer, the witness, and we can allow things, as we were talking about earlier, to move through us.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need to latch onto them going, oh, that's me. No, it's not you. It's moving through,
Mm-hmm.
it's moving through,
Yeah.
So I love that, and I think we can start, I think one of the places that we start is ritual and introducing that back to ourselves. Nature allows us to do that as well. Introduce that aspect of ritual.
Absolutely. I love doing nature rituals. Whenever I take my classes out and we do, opening up to the elements and the directions in nature, nature comes in and really responds, right? Like in such a strong way, like she's waiting for that. She's waiting for that invitation to arrive.
Not only is she waiting for it, but there are all of these, as I was saying, that they became first very evident to me in Costa Rica, but all of this support that we're getting, right? Support that we're all getting. And when we open that up in nature, all of the other support comes through, because they're here and they're waiting and they're saying yes, yes, then they want to support us. We've got more support, more guides, more, support than we can imagine. We just allowing ourselves just to bring it through. Instead of thinking of ourselves, you use the word container. Many of us have the confusion that a container then just sits there and we hold it.
Mm-hmm.
But as a container, I like to think of it as a container that things move through, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that we don't hold it and then it's not internal, and yeah.
Yeah, there's this need for circulation. I think that's the biggest sort of like image that I keep getting, is the reason that we get sort of truncated or stuck is that there's some part of us that fears some of the movement that's happening through us, and then we contract around it. And I think people especially contract around difficult emotions, different emotional states, the state of apathy, the state of depression, the state of rage, the state of grief, you know, all these sort of more challenging emotional states, we tend to contract around them. And then it's like picking a splinter. It just kind of like goes deeper. It sort of buries itself inside of us. And so there's this need for constant circulation as a part of that awareness, right? A part of that expression. And so one of the last questions I have for you that keeps popping up is this idea of expression, and whether you have, I know I'm developing new ways all the time of what I call self-care expression. So I'm doing a lot of drawing, because that's really becoming an easier way for me to express through color and form just what I'm experiencing before I can investigate it deeper. And I find that as long as I'm expressing in some way, I'm moving the energy, I'm staying in contact with the energy, I'm learning from it. And so I'm wondering, for you, do you have ways of expressing that you feel like are particularly helpful for you at this time to help keep things circulating?
One of the things that has become very just powerful lately, as I said, is allowing myself to express and bring through this energy, especially when I'm in nature, and that is verbal, auditory, but it's not in a syntactical language that, you know, I know, right? And allowing ourselves, I loved, I don't know who said this, but it was of allowing our souls to speak, right? Allowing our souls, our energetic being, our soul beings, to make sounds. And this is a wonderful way to, you know, not as we begin to do that, that we start making connections with nature, and we also start making connections with our deeper knowing, and it literally opens up places in our bodies. It unblocks things. So I found that extraordinarily beneficial and healing, and also healing for others. So sounding, just, you know, allowing it to come through, and it comes through in, you know, maybe single sounds in the beginning, but just staying with it, and it'll develop into this beautiful, and I believe everyone can do this, can get this connection. And then you find yourself going to various places, different places, and you go, oh, and different sounds come out, and you are connecting with the energetic of that place then. You start to notice the difference and the shift, and it opens up different areas. So that's been a really big one. And for me, of course, writing is, see, that's the other thing, you know, it's the other shift there. It's going over to bringing that now. It's informed my writing, I believe, a lot. Yeah, so that's a really important one lately that's been coming up for me, allowing myself to do that. And you know, being in nature.
I get the same image, you know, when you're talking about this freedom that you get from allowing the sounds to come fully through you, right? To be able to feel them, to hear them, to emanate them. And that direct experience of communicating with your soul and taking it to something that you have a lot of training in, like writing, and inoculating your writing with that understanding is very similar to what we were talking about before, about finding a soft spot on the earth that you can really connect to, and then taking that experience and inoculating your local community with that feeling of connection.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I think bringing it back, keeping it with you, creating some small, you know, just the other day I was working with a woman, and she had a, you know, sort of one of those profound dreams where she wasn't sure if she was awake or asleep. And, you know, we were working with a dream, and at the end I was just like, so how are you going to acknowledge this and say thank you and show your gratitude? Really create, now that you have a really profound understanding of what was being gifted to you more, how are you going to um, acknowledge this, in a
Mhm.
physical way, not just in a, so just to create some sort of small ceremony ritual, and it can be so small, it doesn't have to be a lot. It can just be, I'm going to have a cup of tea and go and sit outside for a moment and just say thank you.
Mhm.
Um, I think we need more and more of that for all kinds of things, to acknowledge externally, to bring it through, express it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that gratitude, being able to name the feeling of gratitude when it occurs, when we're experiencing a gift or something that brings us joy,
Yeah.
just being able to really bring it in. That's that slow down piece in some ways, like to be able to really bring in the experience and kind of bask in that moment. I had that moment this morning with squirrels. We have some squirrels outside that every morning when we get up, we open the curtains first thing, and there are these two squirrels that are like chasing each other, and they're just very young and sweet. And this morning I got home from dropping off everyone at their various schools and workplaces, and I parked my car in front, and there were like 10 of these baby squirrels just rumpusing in our front yard. And I couldn't contain the joy of getting to witness them. So I came out with some walnuts and passed out some walnuts to the squirrels. So just thank you for showing me how abundantly you are all, I mean, they were just running through the trees and just gallivanting. And to get to witness that was such a gift,
Yeah, and it's by really externalizing your gratitude, you're actually acknowledging that it's a dialogue, that's an energetic exchange. And the more and more we do that, the more and more we allow ourselves to remain open, and it's not a separate experience. The more and more we embody it,
Mm-hmm.
and it comes through us, and it just allows us to be a little bit more open, as we go through our day. So that's, yeah, that embodiment. It's a dialogue.
Mm-hmm. So all that bridging, I think that's a definite theme in this conversation, is the bridging between individuals, between states of being, between the earth and the people, between timelines, modes of expression.
Yeah.
All these ways that we bridge those divides, and this idea that we all are in this together. And I want to just affirm that, that all of us, all humans are in this together, all life beings are in this together, all earthly time periods and beings, we're all in this together. And it's all about creating those bridges so that we can come into alignment with each other and heal and discover and evolve consciously together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, doing it consciously and acknowledging it, I think that's one of the largest filters as a group, as a, I don't want to say society. I get tired of that word, but I just want to say as a group of beings, is that consciously acknowledging it with each other is I think, one of our big hurdles right now, and acknowledging it with others outside of our tribe, let's say. Um, now that we found our tribe and we understand that there are people who speak our language and get it all, how do we acknowledge it outside of that?
Mm.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely. And how do we keep connecting to all those? We were talking about this in our pre-conversation, all those who are awakening in the general population in mainstream culture that don't have any framework and don't have any support and don't have any languaging to describe their experience.
But
Right?
they know something is going on. They're just going, whoa, I don't understand. And you can go out, you can go to the grocery store. I go to the grocery store, and, you know, the conversations I hear, I'm just like, wow, you know,
Yeah.
they're going, I don't know what's going on. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I always think, you know, for children and for adults going through this experience, it's all about balancing curiosity with your fear, right? So we were talking about languaging that feels connective rather than languaging that feels scary or exclusive or hard to understand. And like how in the work that we do, we're constantly trying to figure out like what words to use to describe ourselves to people within our community or people outside of our community. I'm always relying heavily on my intuitive guidance to be like, what words is this person going to relate to, right? So that I can build that bridge.
I do that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I want them to stay curious enough to get whatever they need to get out of the interaction. And I don't want to incite too much fear, you know, too much charge for them.
Yeah.
It's about finding a place.
The other thing with that too is just sometimes just our being there, you know, just our being present, right, is enough. And so we don't, it's matching, sometimes it's just matching the language that is there, but infusing it with our own, you know, energetic presence is be enough, right? When we walk into a room, we have a profound effect. If we're present with ourselves, you know, we have a profound effect. So,
yeah. And then again, that's that doing through being, right?
Yeah.
And that is something really big, I think, that we're going to continue to learn about as a people. And especially as a transformational community, I think that's a huge sort of tipping point of learning that we're all sort of trying to find, is how to perfect the art of being and not connecting it so much to the externalized act of doing, right?
Right. Well, part of that is because we're also trying to find new ways of being who we are, you know, to feed ourselves and to live in the world. And there, I think in the right now, for everyone coming into this work, that is a challenge, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I've had to go through that is, okay, what is the expression of this for me look like? How do I do it? And I had a lot of ideas about what it was. And it's like, well, just let those be ideas, and just, you know, until it comes, the being infuses the doing, it comes out of it, it leads to the doing. But boy, in the early, you know, a few years ago, 3 years ago, I was like, what? You know, I had an idea. And so we get trapped there too, as much as anyone else.
Yeah, absolutely. And that right livelihood is a big place right now of questioning.
Yeah. And it's a struggle for a lot of people, and it's an understandable one. Yeah. We're all working on it.
Yeah. And it touches, you know, it's so intertwined in that root base of scarcity and survival, right? Primal survival. And so just being able to sort of dance with that and be flexible with it, and, you know, not get ourselves into this narrow, I think I expand and contract, and having a team is really helpful. Just having people that you can keep you accountable, that you can also discuss the sort of process with, who understand the transformational process, even within business, but having a really firm idea of how you're going forward. And then, because it's an energetic business and it's a spiritual business, getting sort of turned around and being challenged with that rigidity, right? To go through that eye of the needle has been really, really interesting and a really great growth experience. But I'm sure a lot of people in our community who are currently, and probably many people who are at Impact, which is the last time I think we saw each other was at Impact the World. A lot of people there are probably going through some semblance of that right now. We're about a little over a year out from that conference, and everyone there, you know, was there because they have some sort of spiritual, energetic business that they're trying to figure out how to express in the world and be in alignment with their own process, their own healing, their own gifts. Right. That's a interesting process.
Yeah, no, it's true. And, you know, coming to it with a different energetics. I like the way Lee Harris expresses it, you know, am I energetically different enough yet? You know, or the Z's have said, sometimes you have to wait. You just have to be, because suddenly you're gonna know that you're energetically different enough. And then suddenly the doing comes very naturally.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we need to be patient with ourselves with that. I've certainly had to do that, is to allow myself to just be patient. You know?
Yeah, that's the biggest one. Any growth process, right? You have to balance that drive and that patience, that doing and that sitting back.
Yeah.
Experiencing. Well, Allannah, thank you so much for our conversation. I want to, I have so much gratitude that you were so driven towards having this conversation with me, and that you made it happen. And I know we had a lot of technical issues at the beginning when we were trying to set up this call, but it all worked itself out from what I can tell. I think we had a really good connection during the actual call, so that was awesome. Thank you to all the beings that aligned the wavelengths to make our recording happen. And I want to give you an opportunity, if you had anything that you would like to verbally express about offering to the community. Usually our conversation partners have some sort of special deal they want to offer to the community so that cross-pollination can happen. And I'm going to do that for your community as well. So if you have anything you'd like to explain about.
Yes, so for the community that's hearing this, I want to offer, I'm going to just make it very easy. Instead of a percentage, I'm just going to say I'm going to offer readings for $99. And with that, I'm also going to be offering a recording, digitalized MP3 of some of the sound, the vibrational song lines that have been coming through as I've been traveling, and that to help reconnect with those energetic vibrations of the earth. They're calling them vibrational song lines, and I'm like, okay. So with those, yeah. So yeah, very grateful. All you have to do is just email me directly, allannahcapwell@gmail.com. And mention that you heard Stories of Awakening, and we'll schedule a time, and you'll receive the digital file. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Allannah. I really appreciate that. That's a very generous offer. I'm really looking forward to hearing those myself. So maybe we'll do a session. That would be excellent. And again, thank you so much for joining this project. Our stories are so powerful, and our conversations within those stories and experiences are really transformative. So this is always a deep.
I love that you're doing this, because I think that the more we can hear from each other, the more it helps each of us understand our own journey and go, oh, I'm not alone. And that we're not alone.
Yeah.
You know, though it can feel like it sometimes, we're all experiencing this. So it's great to have these stories of awakening rather than waiting until everybody, you know, is offering everything.
Mm-hmm. I think I constantly get this vision that we're rising together. Yes. And our stories really help to propel that rising tide, right? It helps to lift the whole web of humanity up.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So thank you very much. Love it.
Absolutely. My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you. And to our audience, until next time, and we'll see you next month.